Remember arcades? Not the ones filled with crane games and various forms of legal gambling. I'm talking about the ones that have games. Actual factual games. Ski balls, basketball, Daytona, MotoGP, House of the Dead, more House of the Dead, games kinda like House of the Dead, Time Crisis, that Time Crisis clone where you have to actually dodge, Tekken, Street Fighter, a Guilty Gear machine with one button not working, air hockey, classics. Real fun games. I say this because for me, these short, colorful experiences possibly built the foundation of my approach to gaming at home. This is probably why I don't have a lot of childhood memories with lengthy RPGs. Whenever my classmates talk about FF7 or Chrono Trigger, I just quietly listen. I mean, I didn't play games to read after all, that's for nerds. One day, Papa Mouse excitedly talked about this one arcade game he played and bought a PS1 port of that game. And that got me curious. He usually just buys a bunch without saying anything. So if this one got him giddy, then it's probably good. Spoiler, it's pretty damn good. Bishi Bashi is a video game series by Konami that's primarily made for arcades. And before we go further, you gotta see the controls. I'm guessing the game is an onomatopoeia for the fact that you mash these three huge buttons. Then I checked various online dictionaries and it's defined as without holding back, relentlessly, vigorously, which makes perfect sense given the nature of the game. Now, I don't know if there was ever a Bishi Bashi machine in the Philippines. So I've told myself that if I ever go to Japan, my goal is to find one and play the heck out of it. Decades later, I wasn't able to find the same Bishi Bashi machine. It has been decades after all. Instead, I found something better. Bishi Bashi channel is launched in 2018. It is sadly an arcade exclusive, with this one having modified the middle button into a wheel-like thing where you can do turning and spinning actions with it. And yeah, I did play the heck out of it. Back to the port, it is actually a combination of two compilation games, Super and Hyper Bishi Bashi. These collections, in turn, are a combination of various Bishi Bashi and similar titles from the same company, although some have slightly different control schemes. Speaking of which, how do you actually play it? Well, think of it as WarioWare, but more absurd and, I guess, very Japanese. Each minigame uses the buttons in a myriad of ways, from movement controls, multiple choice, Guitar Hero, tilting, just mashing the heck out of it, you name it. And the goals are usually just getting a better time or a score, the works. Now, Hyper Bishi Bashi is the one I remember playing as a kid, only for the fact that you see these two goofballs on the screen. What I like about this one is that when you play solo, you have a CPU opponent to go up against. There's also difficulty scaling and the AI can be pretty challenging, so I think anyone can have a ball even by themselves. Solo play for Hyper has 3 modes. Hyper mode, where you play through 20 random minigames, Crazy mode, which bumps that up to 27, and Roulette, where you spin a wheel and let it provide, as someone may say. You have 2 lives to spare when playing the game, replicating the arcade experience. Thankfully though, you have infinite continues, so the life system is more of a challenge than anything. Before each game, you are given instructions on how to play, and I found it awesome that you can see the PS1 controller during these explanations, so even if you play the Japanese version, it's easy to pick up on what to do. In certain games where a tie is possible, Hyper Bishi Bashi has a tiebreaker system where it's really just a mash for your life type of minigame. Although I really love how you just yeet the other person here. After going through the stages, if you play Hyper or Crazy mode, you're led to the credits. Then you're set back to the title screen and do it all over again. There's really no story or plot to follow here, not even a premise of why you're doing all this. But it doesn't matter, really. It's unapologetic fun at its purest form. Now, I'll go back to the games a little bit more in a bit, but first, notice how the backgrounds and assets for the game had different styles. They range from deformed faces to what I can guess are stock photos. I think this is because of the game being a compilation, as I said. Now, some of them are pretty memorable. I mean, look at Uncle Bean over here. What a lad. And the music. I love how it sets up the whole crazy variety show aesthetic it's going for. But it isn't anything to rave about. The sound design, however, is top-notch. It is hilarious and over the top. My favorite of which is this one from the Japanese version. The Western version is still fun, but it isn't as iconic.
Attention!
Now, I distinctly remember playing in Japanese, but for the sake of this video and me wanting to play with my wife, I played the English version so that even the text is in English. And while I mentioned that the instructions are for the most part clear regardless of language, just having familiar text is just much easier. And while I said that playing this solo is super fun, of course playing this with someone, whether it was your sibling or your friend or your wife, the enjoyment just increases 1,000-fold. Because there's nothing really better than mashing buttons and bantering loudly side by side with someone. And that's, I think, what I really missed about playing locally. I mean, online couch co-op while on Discord is well and good, but you know that it just hits different when you're both on the actual couch together. And since I have it loaded, I might as well play Super Bishi Bashi. Unfortunately, I feel a lot of the games in Super feel either inferior or draft versions of the ones in Hyper. And the more unique ones are kinda okay. So I won't dwell on this one for long. So yeah, it's still a good time, but I recommend just going for Hyper. Speaking of Hyper, here are my top 10 Hyper Bishi Bashi minigames. Clock. Punch the clock at the top of the hour. Closest one wins. I like how the left side is a standard city and the right side is just Egypt. I mean, okay. Dice. Choose the dice with the most dots. The die faces start normally, then they don't. It can get slightly trypophobic when it starts showing a whole lot of dots though, so be warned. No! You just nod or shake your head if the images are the same or not. More speed than technique. I do like the dynamic to making funny faces. And the action needed to nod or shake is obvious, but sometimes it feels a bit tricky as well, so that's to the fun. Bye! You mash to make the newlyweds run faster, then hold a button till your preferred angle. Not a lot of minigames have 2 extra steps, so this one is pretty interesting. Also, my wife told me she wished we did this on our wedding, so I'll take note of that for our anniversary. Flower. Just mash as fast as you can to make a flower bloom. It's a really simple and super primal act, but I don't know, it just feels super fun and funny, like making this stupid plant grow faster. Punch. Backstep or punch your opponent, but only if you follow the instructions above your heads. Now, I'm not good at these super reflex type games, but I don't mind. Just seeing the Rock'em Sock'em models, they crack me up. Arrow. Do cool tokusatsu poses by following the direction using the controller. It starts up simple, then ramps it up with some strange zigzags and straight up 360s. It's a bit janky to do using the buttons, but For me, that's the charm, I guess. Karate. Punch and kick bad guys with correct button presses. It's pretty simple and easy. I feel it's usually picked by RNG as one of the first games you'll play, which is great because it serves as a great introduction to the controls and mechanics. Bomb. Shove the food to you and the bomb to your opponent before they do the same. It gets hella frantic since you have to juggle two conditions while being faster than your opponent. So expect a lot of bombs to your face, courtesy of yourself. Beans. Simply put, the greatest GOAT game of all time. Catch and nom the beans by pressing the corresponding button. For the Western release, they changed the colors to correspond to the PS1 buttons. An awesome change, I think. Of all the games, this, in my opinion, represents the whole of Bishi Bashi and how I love my games to be played. Kinda weird, kinda wonderful, easy to play, and very funny to watch. I mean, look at his face. Now that is the face of a champion. And there you have it. Honestly, if you got this far, congrats. It is probably the most incoherent episode I've ever done, but I just really love this game, man. It's just so dang fun. It's games, baby. But I do need to end this episode on something akin to insight. So here's what I got. I think depth and complexity are honestly overrated when it comes to enjoyment. Sometimes all you need are 3 huge colorful buttons or a controller that's ready for a beatdown, and you're gonna have a good time. This has been a large mouse.